The black Range Rover rolled into the dusty village square in Enugu, and everything stopped. Market women froze mid-conversation, their mouths hanging open. Men leaned on their bicycles, eyes wide with disbelief. Grace sat in the back seat, her heart pounding. The same people who had laughed at her wedding were now staring at her like she had fallen from the sky. Beside her sat James in his wheelchair, dressed in a sharp gray suit. But who was James really? And how had a poor girl like Grace ended up in a luxury car with the man everyone called a useless beggar? Hello family, welcome back. Please hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, it really supports our channel. Don't forget to share with your friends and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And please tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax and enjoy the story. 3 months earlier, life had been very different for Grace. She lived in a small wooden house in Enugu with her mother. The roof leaked when it rained, and the walls had cracks that let mosquitoes inside at night. Grace's father had died when she was just 12 years old. Since then, she and her mother had struggled every single day. They sold roasted corn by the roadside to survive. Sometimes, when things got really bad, they had to borrow money from neighbors. But the debts kept growing bigger and bigger. And the whispers never stopped. Poor people always borrow, the villagers said. They will never amount to anything. Grace was now 24 years old. People in the village knew her for two things, her beauty and her humble heart. But beauty could not pay rent. Beauty could not buy medicine for her sick mother. Her mother was weak and ill. Every night she prayed for a miracle. She prayed for something, anything to save them from their suffering. That miracle came one hot afternoon, though nobody expected it to look the way it did. Grace had gone to fetch water from the well when she saw him. James. He was the crippled man who lived near the old church in their neighborhood. Most people in the village avoided James. He did not talk much. When he did speak, his voice was soft and strange, like he carried heavy secrets he was not ready to share. He wore plain, worn-out clothes. His small house was half hidden behind wild bushes. Some people said he begged for food, though no one had ever actually seen him do it. That day James was struggling badly. He was trying to move a heavy bag of rice from an old wheelbarrow. His wheelchair kept slipping on the uneven ground. Grace did not think twice. She ran to help him. "Careful," she said, lifting the other side of the bag. "You will hurt yourself." James looked up at her, surprised. His eyes were kind but sad. "People don't usually help me," he said quietly. Grace smiled warmly. "Then maybe they have forgotten how to be human." Something changed in James's heart at that moment. He had lived in that village for 4 years and no one had ever helped him like this. No one had ever smiled at him with such genuine kindness. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. James started coming to buy roasted corn from Grace and her mother. He did not talk much, but every time he came, he left more money than the corn was worth. Grace noticed how grateful he looked. She noticed how his eyes lit up whenever she showed him even the smallest kindness. Slowly, she began to feel something she could not explain. But kindness could not feed her family. When her mother's health got worse and the landlord gave them just 2 weeks to pay rent or leave, Grace felt hopeless. That evening she sat by her mother's bedside. Tears streamed down her face. "Mama," she whispered, "I will do anything to save you. Even if it means marrying a man I don't love." The next day news spread through the village like wildfire. James had gone to Grace's mother with an offer that shocked everyone. He wanted to marry Grace. In exchange he would pay all their debts and take care of them for life. What would Grace decide? The women at the market could not stop talking about it. "Marry the cripple?" one woman said loudly. Grace must have gone mad. Grace's childhood friend Helen pulled her aside near the well. Her face was full of concern and pity. "Grace, don't do this," Helen begged. "You are young and beautiful. You deserve more than pity." Grace looked at her friend with tired eyes. "Pity doesn't buy medicine, Helen. And my mother doesn't have time to wait for dreams." Helen shook her head sadly and walked away. She could not understand why Grace would throw her life away like this. The day of the wedding came faster than anyone expected. The small church was filled with people, but not because they were happy. They came to gossip and to stare. Some came to witness the tragedy. Others came to laugh quietly behind their hands. Grace wore a borrowed white gown. Her face was pale but calm. She had made her choice and she would not turn back now. James sat in his wheelchair near the altar. He wore a plain black suit that looked old but clean. When Grace walked down the aisle, their eyes met. For just a moment, Grace saw something in his eyes that made her fear disappear. She saw strength. She saw grace. And she saw an emotion she could not name. The priest began to speak. But his words were drowned out by whispers from the crowd. "She's marrying him for money," someone said. "She's finished. What kind of future can they have?" Grace swallowed her pride and spoke the words she had practiced in her heart. "Ido." James's lips curved into the smallest smile. "You don't know how much those words mean to me," he whispered softly. When the ceremony ended, James turned to Grace. "I know you didn't choose me for love," he said quietly. "But one day I will make sure you never regret this." His words stayed with Grace as they left the church. People stared and whispered as they passed. But James kept his head high, and Grace tried to do the same. They arrived at James's house, and Grace was surprised by what she saw. Everything inside was shockingly neat and organized. There was new furniture in the sitting room. The floors were spotless and shining. A fresh, clean scent filled the air. This did not look like a beggar's home at all. Grace looked around in confusion. How could someone so poor afford all of this? Where did the money come from? That night, as she lay in bed, Grace could not sleep. Her mind was full of questions. She stared at the ceiling, wondering who exactly she had married. Outside, under the moonlight, the villagers continued to laugh and gossip about her choice. They called her foolish. They said she had thrown her life away. But they did not know the truth. They did not know that the man they mocked was hiding a secret. A secret so powerful that it would change everything. And very soon that secret would be revealed. Very soon, everyone who had laughed would have to swallow their words. But for now, Grace simply closed her eyes and prayed that she had made the right choice. Had she? The morning after her wedding, Grace woke up expecting awkward silence. But instead she found peace. The room was quiet and filled with the soft scent of fresh flowers. Morning sunlight slipped gently through the curtains. James sat near the window with a book in his hand. He wore glasses that made him look calm and intelligent. He looked nothing like the broken man the village believed him to be. "Good morning," Grace said softly, feeling nervous. James looked up and smiled faintly. "You slept well?" "Yes, thank you," she replied awkwardly. "Do you want tea?" He shook his head. "Already made some." Grace blinked in surprise. "You made tea?" James smiled and turned a page of his book. "My legs may not work, Grace. But my hands still do." Something about his calmness made her feel uneasy. There was no bitterness in his voice. No self-pity. Just quiet strength that she did not expect. She looked around the room again. The furniture was not what she had imagined. It was elegant and polished, almost new. The curtains were made of fine material. The walls were freshly painted. The bed frame was carved from beautiful wood. For someone who was supposed to be poor, Grace thought, this house looked suspiciously well cared for. Over breakfast, James spoke very little. But when he did, his words carried a strange depth. He asked about her mother, her dreams, and her favorite foods. No one had ever asked her those things before. Not like that. Not with such genuine interest. Grace answered shyly, half expecting him to mock her. But he only listened quietly, his eyes warm and kind. When she finished talking, James said something unexpected. "You deserve more than what the world has given you, Grace. And I will make sure you get it." Grace laughed awkwardly. She thought he was joking. "You can barely feed yourself. What can you possibly give me?" James did not answer. He just smiled and looked out the window. Later that day, Grace went outside to fetch water from the well. Villagers passing by slowed their steps. They whispered behind her back. "There she is," one woman said loudly enough for Grace to hear. "Still staying with that useless man. She must be regretting it already." Grace pretended not to hear. But the words cut deep into her heart. When she reached the well, Helen was waiting. Her old friend stood with her arms crossed. "Grace," Helen said coldly, "you still look sane. That's a miracle." Grace sighed. "Good morning to you too, Helen." Helen pressed her. "Tell me, what's it like living with him? Does he even talk? Does he eat? Does he move?" Grace frowned. "He's not as helpless as you think." Helen rolled her eyes. "Don't defend him, Grace. You threw your life away for pity." Grace did not answer. She filled her bucket with water and walked away. But deep inside, her heart was beginning to whisper something different. Something strange. James was not what he seemed. That night, while cleaning the house, Grace found a small wooden box tucked away beneath James's desk. She hesitated, but curiosity got the better of her. Inside the box were a few papers, a gold wristwatch, and a photograph. Grace picked up the photograph and froze. It showed James standing beside a man in an expensive suit. Both men were smiling in front of a large, modern building. The sign on the building read, Thompson Group Holdings. Grace's heart began to race. That could not be him. Could it? The same James who everyone said begged by the church steps? The one everyone mocked and pitted? Her thoughts spun wildly. Who was this man she had married? Before she could think further, James rolled into the room. Grace quickly closed the box and pretended to sweep the floor. But James noticed the tension in her eyes. What did you find? He asked gently. Nothing, Grace said quickly. Just cleaning. James studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. You're curious? That's good. You'll need that someday. Before Grace could ask what he meant, James rolled past her toward the kitchen. He was humming softly to himself. The sound was strange. Content. Like a man at peace with secrets he was not ready to reveal. What was James hiding? Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of their life together settled into something unexpected. Grace learned that James spent hours reading newspapers and writing letters at his desk. Sometimes strangers came to visit him. They arrived in shiny, expensive cars. Men in suits who spoke quietly in the corner before leaving with firm handshakes. Each time, Grace watched from the doorway pretending not to notice. But her mind was full of questions. Who were these people? Why would such important-looking men visit a poor crippled man? One evening, as the sun dipped low and the crickets began to sing, James turned to Grace suddenly. Grace, he said, would you come with me to Lagos tomorrow? Grace blinked in surprise. Lagos? Why? I need to take care of something important, James said calmly. You'll understand soon enough. Grace hesitated. I've never left Enugu before. James smiled. Then it's time you did. The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up in front of their small house. The same villagers who had mocked Grace now stood with their mouths hanging open. James was wheeled into the car, dressed in a crisp, expensive-looking suit. Grace sat beside him, wearing a simple but elegant dress. Is that James? One villager whispered in shock. And that car? Another woman gasped. No, it can't be him. But it was. As the car drove off, leaving a cloud of dust behind, Grace stared at James with wide eyes. Who are you really? She asked quietly. James smiled, his eyes fixed on the horizon ahead. The man everyone rejected, he said softly. But that's about to change. Grace's heart pounded in her chest. Something told her that whatever waited in Lagos would change everything she thought she knew about the man she had married. The drive to Lagos was long and quiet. Grace had grown up hearing about the big city. People said it sparkled with wealth and swallowed the poor. Yet here she was, in a car smoother than anything she had ever experienced, beside a man she thought she knew but clearly did not. James sat beside her calmly. His face was unreadable as the trees gave way to tall buildings and glass towers that glittered in the sunlight. Grace tried to speak several times but stopped herself. What could she even ask? Are you secretly rich? That sounded ridiculous even in her head. When the car finally stopped, Grace's mouth fell open. Before her stood a massive building. It was tall, modern, and elegant. Gold letters gleamed on the marble front. Thompson Group Holdings. Grace turned to James, confused and shocked. This is where we're going? James smiled faintly. Yes, come with me. As they entered, the atmosphere changed completely. People in suits bowed slightly as they passed. Good morning, Mr. Thompson, one man said respectfully. Everything's ready for the meeting, sir. Grace froze. That name. That building. It was all connected. She stared at James, shock washing over her face like cold water. You're not James the beggar, she whispered. James turned his wheelchair toward her. His gaze was calm but piercing. No, he said softly. I never was. Grace struggled for words. Her mind was spinning. Then who are you? James looked at her and for the first time the mask slipped away. My full name is James Thompson. I'm the heir and CEO of Thompson Group. Grace could barely breathe. But how? Why? 4 years ago, James continued quietly, an accident left me unable to walk. My fiancée left me within a week. The people I trusted most betrayed me for my money. He paused, his voice growing softer. I wanted to see the world without my name or my wealth. To see who would still look at me like a man, not a title. Grace's breath caught in her throat. Everything suddenly made sense. The visitors. The polished furniture. The quiet confidence. The expensive car. You mean all this time you've been pretending? She whispered. Not pretending, James said gently. Searching. Who had he been searching for? Grace didn't know what to say. Her thoughts tangled between shock, disbelief, and something she couldn't quite name. Pride maybe. For all the whispers and laughter, she had stood beside him. And now she was the wife of the man everyone in the village would fall at their knees to serve. "Why didn't you tell me?" Grace asked quietly, her voice shaking. James turned his wheelchair to face the wide glass window. The city skyline glowed behind him like a painting. "Because if I told you, you might have treated me differently. I wanted to know who would stay when there was nothing to gain." Grace stared at him, her heart pounding. "And what did you find?" James looked back at her, his voice steady and sure. "I found you." Silence filled the room. For a moment, Grace didn't know whether to cry or smile. All she could do was look at him. This man she had pitied, who turned out to be the one everyone else had underestimated. Later that day, James took Grace on a tour of the company. The employees greeted her warmly now, recognizing her as the woman beside their boss. But Grace still walked like the village girl she was. Humble. Polite. Her eyes wide with wonder at everything she saw. When they reached James's office, she stopped at the door. She was stunned by the sheer luxury. A desk of polished oak. Floor-to-ceiling windows. And framed photos of James before the accident. He looked happier then. Walking. Smiling. Free. Grace's voice softened. "You must have lost a lot." James nodded slowly. "I did. But I also gained something better. Perspective." As he spoke, Grace noticed something else on the wall. A picture of a hospital under construction. The sign read, "Thompson Foundation for the Disabled." She turned to him with tears in her eyes. "You're building this?" "Yes," James said. "For people like me. People society gives up on. I know what it's like to be pitied, to be laughed at, to feel invisible. I want to give them hope." Tears filled Grace's eyes. For the first time she truly saw him. Not as the man she was forced to marry, but as someone with a heart far richer than his bank account. "James," she whispered. "I misjudged you." He smiled. "You didn't misjudge me, Grace. You just believed what everyone else saw. Now you know the truth. I never needed someone perfect. I just needed someone kind." That night, back at their home in Enugu, the silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was peaceful. Grace helped James into bed, her heart still full of everything she had learned. As she pulled the blanket over him, he caught her hand gently. "Grace," he said softly, "you stood beside me when everyone else mocked me. You don't know what that means." She smiled faintly. "Maybe now I do." James looked into her eyes. "Tomorrow I want you to come with me again. To the village council." Grace froze. "Why?" "Because it's time to tell them the truth," James said firmly. Grace's eyes widened. "You mean?" James nodded. "Let them see who you really married." And with that he closed his eyes. A faint smile lingered on his lips. Grace lay awake long after, staring at the ceiling. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and anticipation. Tomorrow everything would change. The whispers. The laughter. The pity. Tomorrow the world would finally know who James really was. And when they did, no one would ever mock her again. Because she hadn't just married a beggar. She had married a king in disguise. What would happen when the village saw the truth? The next morning, the sun rose brighter than usual. It was the kind of morning that carried promise in the air. Birds chirped from the rooftops, and the wind whispered softly through the palm trees. Grace sat beside James in the black Range Rover. Her palms were sweating as the car hummed steadily along the dirt path she knew so well. Her heart raced. The same people who once mocked her were about to see her return. Not as a laughingstock, but as the wife of the man they all secretly envied. "Are you nervous?" James asked gently, noticing her fidgeting hands. Grace managed a small smile. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't." James smiled back. "They'll never believe it. But sometimes people deserve to taste their own words." When they finally drove into the village, everything came to a stop. The market women froze mid-conversation. Men leaned on their bicycles, staring in disbelief. Children pointed and shouted, "A big car! A big car!" Mrs. Ngozi, the neighbor who had laughed the loudest on Grace's wedding day, dropped her basket of tomatoes. "Isn't that Grace?" she whispered to her friend. "Yes," her friend replied, eyes wide. "But how? Who's that man with her?" The car rolled to a stop in front of the church. The same place where Grace had said her vows and shame. James's assistant quickly stepped out and opened the door. James rolled down the ramp in his custom wheelchair, dressed sharply in a gray suit that seemed to absorb the sunlight. The crowd gasped loudly. Grace stepped out beside him, her posture straight, her dress simple but elegant. Gone was the timid girl who once lowered her head in embarrassment. Chief Peter, the village chief, approached cautiously. "James, how?" he stammered. "Last we saw you, You were the man everyone pitied. Yes, I was, James said calmly. But that's the thing about life, Chief. People forget that even those they look down on can rise higher than they ever imagine. The air grew thick with shocked murmurs. Grace's mother rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. James, my son, she whispered, trembling. I don't understand. James smiled softly at her. You don't need to, Mama. Just know that your daughter's kindness changed my life. She saw a man where others saw a burden. He turned to the crowd, his voice firm but steady. You all mocked her. You all said she married a beggar for money. But tell me, where were you when she chose compassion over comfort? When she stayed by my side when she had every reason to run? The silence was deafening. Even the wind seemed to pause. Mrs. Ngozi stepped forward hesitantly. So, you're saying you're not poor? No, far from it, James said. He gestured toward the car. I am James Thompson, owner of Thompson Group Holdings. The same man whose company donated that new school building last year. Gasps erupted around them. Some people clutched their heads in disbelief. Others looked down in shame. And this woman, James said, looking at Grace with pride, is my wife. The same woman you laughed at. Chief Peter cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. Mr. Thompson, please forgive the ignorance of this village. There's nothing to forgive, James interrupted softly. But let this be a reminder. Never mock someone because of where they are today. You never know where they'll be tomorrow. He reached for Grace's hand and she squeezed it gently. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness but of relief. Mrs. Ngozi stepped forward again, trembling. Grace, my daughter, forgive us. We didn't know. Grace smiled kindly. You don't need my forgiveness, Mama Ngozi. Life already taught you the lesson. As James's car pulled away, the villagers watched in stunned silence. Some waved awkwardly. Others bowed their heads in regret. Grace sat quietly beside James, looking out the window as the village disappeared behind them. I think I've never seen people that quiet before, she said softly. James chuckled. Silence usually follows revelation. She looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For making them see me differently. James turned his gaze toward the horizon. You're wrong, Grace. I didn't make them see you differently. You did that yourself with your heart. A few weeks later, life settled into something beautiful. James and Grace now lived in a mansion overlooking the same hills where he used to sit and dream. One evening, as the golden sunset bathed the sky, they sat on the balcony together. Grace leaned her head against his shoulder. I still can't believe it, she said softly. How did my life change so fast? James smiled, taking her hand. It changed the day you chose kindness over pride. You didn't marry a crippled man for money. You married a man everyone else had given up on. She blinked back tears. And you gave me something I never thought I'd have. Respect. A home. Love. He squeezed her hand gently. You deserve it all. In that moment, Grace realized something powerful. True love doesn't see wealth, beauty, or status. It sees the heart. And sometimes, the one everyone laughs at becomes the very one destiny crowns. Because the greatest treasures in life are not found in bank accounts. They are found in hearts that choose kindness when the world chooses cruelty. Grace had married a beggar. But she had gained a king. And together, they proved that love built on compassion will always rise above the mockery of the world. We've come to the end of today's story. I hope it touched your heart. Thanks for watching and staying with us till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?